Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Doctor's Anatomy. Today we are going to talk about the external features of the lungs. Along with that, we are also going to discuss the hilum of the lungs. So lungs, you already aware of lungs. It is a paired organ of the respiratory system, and each lungs is consist of apex, base, as well as three borders, two surfaces, and two fissures for the right side, one fissure for the left side. So these are the part we are going to cover in this session. Okay, so first we are going to discuss about the apex. So this is the lungs of the right side. You can see the aspect that you can visualize over here, that is the anterior aspect, and the superior aspect is lying over here. So the superior most part over here, that is known as an apex of the lungs. It is conical in shape, as well as it is blunt, and it lies 2.5 centimeter above the clavicle. So let me put a clavicle over here. Now you can see this is exactly the same position that remains into the live human being, and you can see that the apex is lying 2.5 centimeter above the middle 1/3 of the clavicle. So that is about the apex. Apart from that, your apex is also covered by the pleura, which is known as a cervical pleura. So that is about the apex. Apex is the superior most part of the lungs, which is directed superiorly. It is 2.5 centimeter above the clavicle, middle 1/3 of the clavicle, and it is covered by the cervical pleura. After understanding of apex, now let us see the base. So base is the inferior most part of the lungs. So let me show you the inferior most part. Okay, so over here you can see this area. This is known as a base. So base, if you can concentrate on that, you can see it is a C-shaped or a semilunar shaped. Generally it will resting onto the diaphragm, and the lungs, if it is a right lung, it is separated from the right lobe of the liver by the right dome of the diaphragm. When it's come to the left side, okay, so left side, the left lung is separated from the left lobe of the liver, as well as spleen and stomach from the left dome of the diaphragm. Okay, so that is about the base. It is the inferior most part, and it is C-shaped, and it separates the right lobe lung from the right lobe of the liver by the diaphragm, as well as for the left lung, it is separated from the left lobe of the liver, stomach and spleen by the left dome of the diaphragm. Now let us discuss the borders. Okay, so lungs, if you are going to see the lungs, it is consist of three borders. That will be the anterior border, inferior border and posterior border. So let me show you the first anterior border. So the first border that you can see, again, this is the anterior aspect that you can visualize in the camera. So here it is the apex. So this border, which is you can see in this area, this is known as an anterior border. It is extended from the apex all the way up to the anterior aspect of your inferior border. So that is known as an anterior border. Over here you can see that the anterior border is uninterruptedly vertically extended downward, but when it's come to the left lung, it is slightly different. So now let me show you the left lung. Okay, here you can see that again this is the apex part, this is the inferior most part. So your anterior border will start from the apex, it will extend it all the way up to here, and now here you can see a notch is present over here. This notch is there, that is known as a cardiac notch. So your anterior border, it is extended from the apex all the way up to the fourth intercostal space, where you will find the cardiac notch. Okay, this is the area where heart is not covered by the lungs. So if you are asking particularly which part of the heart is not covered, okay, it is some part of the right ventricle and some part of the left ventricle which remains uncovered by the cardiac, because of the presence of cardiac. Once you understand the anterior border, now let me bring you the inferior aspect. Okay, so here this is the inferior aspect of the lungs, and the base is demarcated from the anterior surface or the costal surface as well as mediastinal surface by this thick line which is known as an inferior border. So it is started from the lowermost part of the anterior border. That is where it is started, and it will goes like a C shape, and it will terminate itself at the inferior most part of the posterior border. So that is about the inferior border. Inferior border remains same for the both lung. Now let us understand the last border of the lung, that will be the posterior border. So I'll turn down the lungs. Okay. So now whatever you can see, this is the posterior aspect of the lungs, and if you are going to see the border which is somewhat rounded in shape, you can see that anterior border is very sharp. Over here you can find out the sharp border. That is why the posterior border is ill-defined, and it is extended from the apex all the way up to the posterior aspect of the inferior border. So this border is known as an posterior border, which is ill-defined as well as it is somewhat rounded in shape. So once we understand the borders, now let us discuss about the surfaces. Okay, so generally you will find the two surfaces over here. The first one that you can see, this one, this is known as a costal surface, and another one onto the medial aspect, this is known as a mediastinal surface. So first let us discuss about the costal surface. So over here, I don't know in camera where you can see it or not, but there is a strip like formation is that is nothing but the impression of the ribs. So let me show you the ribs over here. Let me bring the ribs over here. So that is how the ribs is located into the lungs in this thorax area. Okay, it is covering the lungs, and whole costal surface, if you are going to see whole costal surface, that will remain along with covered by the ribs. So that is about the costal surface. So after the costal surface, now let us discuss about the mediastinal surface. So this is the mediastinal surface which lies onto the medial aspect. So now whatever you can see on this camera, that will be the medial aspect of the lungs. Over here, the first thing that you will be able to identify is this area. There are a lot of lumens. This area is known as a hilum of the lungs. Later on we will discuss about this, but for a while you need to remember that this area is going to divide your mediastinal surface into two parts. That will be the anterior part and posterior part. So the anterior part of the mediastinal surface is started from the anterior border all the way up to the posterior aspect of the hilum. So that is known as an anterior part of the mediastinal surface that will remain along with the heart. So there will be the cardiac impression over here. You can see the cardiac impression over here. Then the second part that will remain posterior to your hilum and between your posterior border, that area is known as a vertebral area of the mediastinal surface. So that will remain along with the body of the vertebra. So that is about the mediastinal surface. So now we are going to discuss one of the most important structure in the lungs, that is known as an hilum of the lungs. So before that, let me tell you, this area over here, this aspect, this is your anterior border, this is the posterior border, and in between you will find the hilum of the lungs. So there are certain lumens are there along with the hilum of the lungs. Now we are going to discuss each and every lumen. So again remember, this is the anterior aspect over here, this is the anterior aspect, and this is the posterior aspect. So whenever you are holding the lungs into the anatomical position, the anterior most structure that you will find over here, okay, this is the anterior most structure. This lumen is known as a superior pulmonary vein over here. This is the superior pulmonary vein. Then the inferior most structure, okay, so this is the superior aspect, this is the inferior most aspect. So you can see this is the inferior most lumen is there. This lumen is for the inferior pulmonary vein. So now you will be able to recognize the superior pulmonary vein as well as inferior pulmonary vein. Then the posterior most aspect over here, okay, the wall of which remain thick, okay, this is known as a main bronchus. So because this is the right lung, so this will be the right main bronchus. Okay, then you can see there is another lumen between your superior pulmonary vein and main bronchus, okay, that is known as a pulmonary artery. So this lumen is of the pulmonary artery. Over here you need to remember, if you can see the bronchus, okay, this bronchus is bifurcated into two parts, that will be the hyparterial bronchus and aparterial bronchus. Over here you can see that one bronchus, as soon as it enters the lung, it will divide into two lumen, one which is directed above this lumen, okay, that is known as an aparterial bronchus, because it is going above the pulmonary artery. That is why it is known as an aparterial bronchus. Another lumen you will find over here that is directed downward below the opening of the pulmonary artery. So that will known as an hyparterial bronchus. So these are the structures that you need to remember. Again, if you are repeating it from anterior to posterior, you will find the first lumen over here, that will be of superior pulmonary vein. The second lumen that you will find over here, this will be the pulmonary artery, and then the third lumen that you can find out over here, this will known as a main bronchus. And the posterior most part that you will be able to see over here, that will be the inferior pulmonary vein. So these are the structures that are present into the right lung's hilum. So now we have with us the left lung. Okay, again this is the anterior border of the left lung, and this will be the posterior border of the left lung. Now the hilum, we are going to identify the structures in the hilum. So over here, the superior most structure that you will be able to find out over here, this is the superior most structure, which is of the pulmonary artery. So the first structure, superior most structure, that will be the of the pulmonary artery. Then you will find the another lumen just inferior to the pulmonary artery over here, that is known as the left main bronchus. Okay, so this lumen is for the left main bronchus. Then the inferior most structure or inferior most lumen is that this lumen is known as the inferior pulmonary vein. And if you can see, just in front of your left main bronchus, you will find the another lumen which is lying over here, and this is of the superior pulmonary vein. So again, from the superior to inferior, if you are going to see the lumens, the superior most will be of the pulmonary artery, then you will find the left main bronchus, then you will find the superior pulmonary vein, and then you will find the inferior pulmonary vein. So these are the structures that is present into the left lung. Now one more important structure that I want you to see over here, that when the pleura is come, okay, it will not cover the hilum part and it get reflected like this, and then it will give you the reflection onto its inferior aspect over here. You can see this ligament. This is known as a pulmonary ligament, which is remain present in both the lungs. Another thing that you need to appreciate over here, that you can see this impression is that, okay, this impression is present, that is present only onto the left lung, not onto the right lung. This is of the descending thoracic aorta. So your heart will be situated in front of the hilum over here, okay, that will be the left ventricle. This is the impression of the left ventricle. Then you will find the aorta, okay, that will be the arch of aorta. So this impression is of arch of aorta, and then you will find the descending thoracic aorta over here. So these are the few things that you need to remember for the mediastinal surface. Now let us see the fissures. Okay, the first fissure that we are going to see is the oblique fissure. So again, we have with us the right lung, and you all are aware that right lung has two fissures. One is the oblique fissure, another one is the horizontal fissure. So first we are going to discuss about the oblique fissure. So this is the anterior aspect, but to visualize the oblique fissure we need to go to the posterior aspect. Okay, so you can see that this is the posterior border. So your oblique fissure is started 6 cm below the apex. So this is your apex area. You have to go 6 cm inferior from the apex. That is where you will find the oblique fissure. So your oblique fissure is started over here, and let me again bring it into the anterior aspect. So you can see that it is started like this, and then it will come in its anterior aspect. It is directed downward, forward and medially to reach all the way up to your inferior border. So this is the territory of your oblique fissure. I can show you that this is the posterior border, that is where it is started, 6 cm from your apex, inferior from your apex. that is where it is started, it is directed like this, and it will come into its anterior aspect and it will reach all the way up to your inferior border. So your oblique fissure, it will run all the way up to your inferior border and it will terminate itself at the inferior border. And if you want to see from at inferior border where it terminates, it is 5 centimeter lateral from the midline. Okay, so over here you will find the midline and you will have to reach 5 centimeter lateral from that midline. That is where it is terminate itself on the inferior border. So your starting point for the oblique fissure, that is remain from, that will be 6 centimeter below the apex, okay, onto the posterior border. That is where it starts. It runs forward, downward and towards the anterior aspect, and it will reach all the way up to the inferior border and it will terminate itself at the inferior border 5 centimeter lateral from the midline. So now let us discuss about the second feature, that will be the horizontal fissure. For that I'll bring my hand and you can see my finger represents the ribs over here. So my thumb will represent the first rib, second, third and fourth. Okay, over the fourth rib you will find the fissure. Okay, so fourth intercostal joint, that is where you will find the horizontal fissure. Okay, so your horizontal fissure is started from the fourth intercostal joint and it will extend it on its lateral aspect. It will reach all the way up to your oblique fissure. So this is your oblique fissure. You can see the horizontal fissure is extending laterally and it will meet up your oblique fissure at the mid axillary line. Okay, so that is the extension of your horizontal fissure.